Hi, everybody. It's Laura Eisenhower. I'm here today with my dear friend, 𝗤𝘂𝗲𝗏 Healer, and it's really wonderful to be joined by her again. We've done some stuff together in the past, and we're just going to dive into the topic of negative ET agendas and in reference to timelines and where we are currently with all of that. But I'm going to read a few words about her, but I first want to thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, yeah, let me tell you a bit about her. 𝗤𝘂𝗲𝗏 is a light field geneticist from Andromeda and founder of the EarthStar Academy, a comprehensive training ground for light workers, starseeds, and indigos, providing multidimensional healing, training, activation, and mission support. Teacher of self-healing, light body mechanics, galactic shamanism, and sacred sexuality, Z guides others how to access our higher consciousness and psychic abilities, capabilities to heal and embody complete energy sovereignty and move into a life of purpose. So that's so awesome. And, you know, what's cool is, you know, we're going to get into this topic of, negative ET timeline war. And tell us what your thoughts are about that and where you currently feel we are in this timeline war.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm 𝗤𝘂𝗏𝗏. I'm really excited to be here again and to communicate with you guys. I know that Laura had me on for a brief moment a couple months ago when you were doing a show with Harlan and none of my technology would cooperate and I spoke one sentence and then the technology just totally failed. And so I'm super excited to be communicating with your community because I know that every single person in this community, is on a very special path. You are awakening. You are here to bring about a very extraordinary transformation during this evolutionary time on Earth. And so I'm really excited to communicate about, the different dynamics that are playing out on the Earth right now, particularly for the starseeds. I would love to know if you guys resonate with this term starseed or a light worker. I will dissect those words in just a minute here, but I just first want to introduce myself a little bit. I am what I would call an embodied starseed. What that means is that basically when I first woke up back in 2013, I woke up to this booming voice in my ear, basically telling me that I'm from Andromeda and that I had some crazy mission here on Earth. And subsequently, my psychic abilities basically began to activate and I started to viscerally perceive light bodies and subtle energies. And in the beginning of my training, my team often told me to just go into public places and activate my psychic senses and just scan everything. Scan the people, scan the malls, scan the cars, scan the earth, scan the trees. And this is, over a course of a few years, how I understood exactly what the holographic prison system is on the earth, how these frequency fences exist in human consciousness and in the light body of the earth and human civilization, and continued into my study on what I now call the false matrix. And I understand that there are a lot of beings here on the earth right now that are feeling this desire to be of service to the collective in the way of supporting humanity in our awakening. And so at this current moment, I have been integrating my higher dimensional selves. I discovered that the part of me that is residing in Andromeda or is from Andromeda is a 7D light field geneticist. Now, what that means is that I have a higher self or a soul filament that is in a higher dimension that has studied the science of geometries and genetics for a very, very, very long time now. Science kind of exists differently upstairs and in the galactic civilizations where, it's really cultivated over eons, many, many, many lifetimes of devoting our love to creation to the point where we are given keys and knowledge of understanding of how the fabric of reality really works. And so from those very many lifetimes of studying and engaging in this love with the fabric of creation, we learn how to weave geometries, which is what we now know as DNA. DNA of universal structures, and as well of consciousness, which projects into anatomy and biology and all the beings that we see in the physical reality and other realities as well. So I know that for these skills, I was called into the Starseed mission. At this moment in time, I work and communicate with the Guardian Alliance and various other angelic families of star societies that support the Starseed mission on Earth. And so on that front, from that perspective, I am supporting a lot of starseeds on their mission on the Earth, because I supported them in crafting different strands of DNA to bring to the Earth. And this DNA carries our memories, carries our skills, carries our lifetimes that we've lived beyond this 3D matrix, beyond the Earth. So many of us understand how light fields work, how life force works. Many of us are engineers and scientists from other star systems that are here working together. So, any of you that are feeling that tingle down your spine as I'm speaking these things, I'm definitely communicating directly to you. So, today, as I was getting ready for this talk, actually late last night, the Galactics like to communicate with me in the middle of the night because that is when everybody else is asleep and there's very little interference in the consciousness fields. But basically, there are many people in this community right now that are like, well, I'm awake, I really want to help humanity, but I don't really know if I'm a starseed, or I don't really know if I need to call myself a light worker. So we want to talk about the scientific basis of why, certain people are awake and why certain people are not. So, for most of the people in this community, I'm sure many of us no longer watch TV, and if you turn on the news, you could feel that vibration of deception or something strange, right? It's like whatever it is that they're trying to say, there's the static almost that makes it difficult, and we can just right away know that there's certain things that are lies. Well, how come that some people can have that kind of discernment of these vibrations, and yet other people, maybe our beloved family, or people that are living in the matrix, how come so many turn their TVs on and just eat it all up? What is the difference? What is the fundamental difference? And this is a scientific answer, really. My definition of a light worker or of a starseed is just anyone that has basically a more intact DNA template or genetic disposition. What that means is that higher consciousness or light is able to move through the geometry of your DNA and create either a very coherent field. We experience that as, lightness and intuition and connectedness and happiness and love, or the light is flowing through degraded or distorted fields of DNA. And of course, we experience that as confusion and fear and depression and all of those things. And so for so many of us, it was very obvious as we were waking up. For myself, that began, early on in middle school and in high school. I was like, there's something off about this planet. These people are going to school and they're just eating it all up and reading the textbooks and they think it's all true. And I'm sure so many of you resonate that a lot of those things just never made sense to you in your consciousness, right? It never sat well. The geometries of that information didn't fit into the frequency of your consciousness. And so I would say that every person that is awake right now that can intuitively or even subconsciously discern between truth and deception, between organic vibrations of consciousness and inorganic vibrations of consciousness as being emitted on our TV and in popular media, everyone that is awake at this time is awake because of this coherent DNA that you're carrying, right? That's what's allowing you to have this experience of lucidity. And so the level of consciousness then is, really a scientific thing of just basically how much light and how much presence and how much consciousness is able to move through your genetics at any given time. And so basically, if you're here and you know certain truths and you refer to yourself as being awake to a certain level, then you would be a light worker or a starseed, especially if you're somebody that has an inherent desire to help in some way. And I think that that's kind of the core of our conversation today. Because as we can tell, the last couple of years have been very interesting on Earth. This whole shenanigans that these beings are trying to pull with, this plague that is on the planet right now. It's now been 2 whole years, and we were told that we would, quarantine for a couple of weeks and then everything would kind of go back to normal at some point. We were told that if we just accepted certain medical interventions, that things would go back to normal, and we're quickly seeing that these are not true, and there are certain agendas that these beings are trying to fulfill through this this plague, and it's kind of a final ditch effort. And so today we want to talk about the different negative ETs that are behind this current agenda, what this current agenda is for, because there's actually very many different intentions. It's not just one thing that these beings are trying to do. It's a very multidimensional situation. And particularly, we're going to be talking about this situation where I'm noticing that it's almost like the masses are in a hypnosis, right? It's like people are in this state of psychosis, and it's very difficult to shake them loose or tell them the truth. It's almost like there is a field that is overlaid on top of people that is creating these beliefs. And we want to dive into what that is and how that exists, and of course then how we can actually learn more about the special DNA that we have. Again, if you're awake right now, then it means that you have more coherent DNA. You have DNA that is more intact than most of humanity. That is why you're here. That is why you can kind of navigate through this situation while still being very connected to your soul essence and what you truly believe in. And so if this is something that we can understand, then we can take this to the next level of realizing that we can begin to work with our DNA to the point where we become active co-creators and emitters of certain frequencies. And then that'll lead us into this invitation to a grid work mass meditation that we are organizing later on this week in 2 days. So January 5th is when the Earth, the Sun, and the Sirius star system is in alignment. The high Sirian star beings, the angelics there, they've been holding space for this universal mission for a long time. And during this window of time when the Earth, the Sun, and Sirius are in alignment, they've asked me to organize a mass meditation. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are new to my work, but I am somebody that is deeply aware of different kinds of things in the New Age community where things are kind of often watered down. And I'm a huge proponent for, scientific action and action that is based in knowledge and based in mastery. And so what we are basically intending to do is to, what they showed me was that they were going to be able to emit this frequency from Sirius. And it's kind of an antidote frequency for mind control and the AI implants that are perpetuating the amnesia. I'm going to go in and talk about all of those things in a moment. But essentially, when we do these mass meditations together in support of the galactics, we're able to receive these frequencies and emit them through human telepathy. Emitting vibrations of awakening through human telepathy is actually probably the most powerful thing we can do as a family collective at this time. Because when we think about it, it's really a scalar war, it's a frequency war, it's a consciousness war. And how the negative ETs are doing it is through the radio waves, through 5G towers, and through the TV, which they are very visceral, physical wavelengths of consciousness that has information that is holding humanity in a state of amnesia and hypnosis. And so how we would counteract that is actually by reclaiming our own consciousness and working with our own light body to the point where we are accreting coherent source waves or source energy. And from that place, we can create a field around the planet where we are actually disabling the mind control technologies. And this is kind of what we are moving into doing. So that was a long ramble.
No, that was not a ramble. That was brilliant. Wouldn't you say that the mind control and the social engineering is at the root of disease and the reason why there's genetic damage passed down generation to generation, because there's that lack of authenticity? So if we're getting false narratives streamed through the news, wouldn't that be more the source of why people are getting sick versus anything else? Like the two go hand in hand, would you say?
Absolutely. And I would say that disease is basically, it only occurs when our biology and our light body is existing in a vibration that is not natural to itself. So human beings, we're actually naturally, these exalted and beautiful and divine and joyful, loving beings. And when you place that organic template, that organic energy, the essence of human, into a container, into a vibration that is the false matrix, where there's fear and poverty and conflict and all those things, the energy system begins to degrade. And through that degradation, we see disease. And of course, all of that is totally capitalized on by the different industries that control this world. Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, even genetic damage that's passed down can be healed by understanding maybe the programming or behavior patterns linked to it that might be ancestral patterns that remain in the unconscious until we begin to do that inner work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, these are practices of, light body restoration. And, these practices have been taught and talked about for a very, very long time in the ancients. They call them practices of bioregenesis. And it's very exciting because, being healthy is a kind of a baseline, right? There's like experiences that these physical bodies are capable of that we've heard of in different ancient mystery schools and in different books and prophecies, where different human beings come into embodiment of their original human capabilities, like walking through walls, miracle healing, walking on water, these kinds of things that we hear about. They are on the further spectrum of what these bodies and what our DNA template is actually capable of. And so very excited about all of those things.
Oh, totally. Would you say that these timeline wars, that starseeds that have a mission are sort of not necessarily at the mercy of those that are asleep, but somewhat confined to maybe a negative ET timeline, as long as they're willing to be of service and be witness to or be participating in being service to others? I mean, and there's a choice to maybe bifurcate away from it if it feels like, okay, this is going nowhere and I don't want to go down that road with them and be on a sinking ship if they're not willing to grab the life jacket, so to speak.
Yeah, so this is an interesting conversation because the first thing is that, the timeline war is something that has been happening, or something that is almost like fantasized of by the negative ETs. And I just use this title because I thought it was fun and that people would click on the video, because there's actually, in fact, not really a war. The negative ETs believe there is a war because they're struggling and they're the ones that are fighting for certain timelines to be intact. But the current wave of evolution and healing is sanctioned from such a high place. So the source, right? God, unity, consciousness, are all of our highest unified source, has intended or has dreamt, has desired for this universe to come into completion. And what that means is, this universe has been going through what we call a free will experiment. And free will is not the natural operating system of every universe. It's kind of an operating system or a process or a game or an episode. Sometimes we're teenagers and then we evolve into a different phase of our life. And so just as we have different phases of our life, universes have phases of growth and different emanations as well. And so the free will experiment was very interesting. And of course, free will is a word that gets tossed around a lot in our community, but very few people actually truly understand, what free will really entails and what it even means. For the most part, people use it in this way that, oh, my ego gets to do whatever it wants and that's free will. Well, if if the ego is actually wounded and controlled by past circumstance or calculated by quantum information that is not free or not sovereign and based on beliefs or something like that, then is actually not free will. And so essentially what happened is that during this architecture, during this template of universal consciousness of free will, certain beings and certain things were given permission to come into existence, right? It's like you can't really have free will unless there are parts that are not in unity in a way. Let's see if there's a better way I can explain this. For example, the inherent qualities of Source, the inherent qualities of God are divinity, love, expansion, infinite creativity, compassion, joy, unity, union, all of these divine qualities of Source that we know. In order for Source to experience itself as something like a serial murderer or a pedophile, it would inherently have to separate itself from itself to have that experience, right? Because those qualities of a serial murderer or a pedophile, those qualities are inherently in opposition to the inherent qualities of God. And so in order for God to experience everything, it had to, of course, then volunteer a part of itself to be separate from itself, which, how can we conceptualize these things with our brain? But that's what we did. And at some point, because of those decisions that we made as a collective to experience all things and free will meaning that everything and anything can happen, including the harming of innocents and children and divine light itself, this then spiraled and perpetuated into the situation that we have on Earth and in the universe. At a certain point, this experiment was then complete, as in we decided that we experienced everything we needed to from that experiment. And so the universe, from the universal Source, dreamt or intended or created this wave of intention of universal reconciliation and healing and restoration. And from that intent, out came the Christos and the starseed families and the angelic families that went on these millions of years, I guess, from our vantage point as human beings upstairs. That's really not very long, but so many of us, if you connect with the teachings of Babaji or Jesus or the Syrian teams or Andromeda or any of these star families, we could have been on this mission for millions of years. Some people call this the Christos realignment mission, but essentially what is occurring on Earth right now is a reconciliation, a reformatting of universal consciousness and a reclaiming of fallen consciousness, a reclaiming of all filaments and fractals and pieces of universal consciousness that fell during this last experiment. And so in a very grounded way, on a human level, what that means is healing the fallen parts of our society and the beings that have fallen into these patterns of victim perpetrator consciousness and ritual abuse and all of those kinds of things. There are certain beings that don't realize that the experiment is over to them. They think that it means that they're going to die or they're going to be punished or something along those lines, and that's why they're really fighting so hard to sustain. And if you've talked to a demon, most of the time they're not having a great time. In my life doing galactic shamanic healing, I spent a lot of time. Pardon?
Not fun to be a demon. I want to drag everybody down for what? For the loosh, for the misery wants company. Sorry, but I don't mean to cut in, but go ahead.
No, it's totally true because, I spent a lot of time in the ethers and in the astral working with different kinds of beings, rehabilitating them, building healing chambers for this consciousness because there's a universal unity. You can't just say, well, you get kicked out of this universe, right? You could
rehabilitation and healing.
Right. It's kind of like having an inner child that's ruining your life. You can't just be like, you suck, I don't know, I can't handle you anymore. Just get out of here. You can't really do that.
Do you think some of
So,
the, oh, keep going.
no, go ahead. What were you going to
I was just
say?
going to ask, do you think some of the breeding programs, the more benevolent kind, are to begin to heal those genetics by abducting individuals in order to gain that genetic information? And some of it's benevolent, but some of it's just vampiric, or
I mean, that's a fascinating thing. But I'll just finish my thought that, when I do bring these entities into these chambers where I do this thing called psionic redaction. That's how I do my healing sessions, where I just project my consciousness into somebody else's body or into the grid, into the ethers, into dimensions, whatever it is. The fabric of these beings' consciousness is really heartbreaking, because there's just so much pain and misery and fear and greed, and all of those vibrations is what's driving those actions from those beings. And so it's fascinating. As far as the breeding programs, to me, it's interesting because obviously, as a geneticist and as somebody that wove star DNA for a lot of star season, it's definitely interesting to have that understanding, and then literally have hundreds of people, like my clients, message me on a daily basis of, saying that they have chills, or they remember me, or they have dreams with me in them, or doing this DNA work. So, sometimes I say things, I'm like, wow, that sounds really crazy. Like, did I just say that out loud? But then, it's really my life. I work with hundreds of starseeds on a yearly basis, and we have these shared experiences. When I weave and activate these lines of DNA, they have visceral, palpable experiences of their consciousness expanding to higher dimensional aspects of themselves. And so from that perspective, that's like the hybrid, that's the organic hybridization program, I guess, that, I'm careful what I say, because on the internet, people can really just stretch the things that you say. Like, did you hear that? I think Z just said that she's part of the hybridization program. Like, what I'm saying is that life field genetics is consciousness and intention and light based. And so I didn't need to, abduct you as a child to insert those light fields. I could just send packets of light and intention down. And so I personally don't, I almost said don't fuck with, but that's like a human millennial lingo right there. I just almost slipped out.
I think it's like the best kind of lingo, regardless. I think the F you
Yeah,
word,
we don't fuck with that.
it's
So
pretty freaking powerful. Anyway, go ahead.
But as somebody with highly advanced coding of DNA, the image that I always get is, how in those movies about pandemics, they often have like the scientist that's making the vaccine, and then in this heroic scene, they'll like give themselves the vaccine to make sure it works, to just test it on themselves. Well, I know that as a light field geneticist on this mission, I've just coded myself with all sorts of experimental DNA that I am now playing with, and all of these things. I know that my DNA was highly coveted. I've had a lot of weird astral and abduction experiences, a lot of DNA stealing scenarios. A lot of my clients, are these beings with highly coded DNA. And so I'm very careful about engaging and talking about those programs, because, truly benevolent beings don't need to abduct anyone. Truly benevolent beings don't need to actually use technology to take and to shift DNA. It is all quantum. It is all light-based. It is all holographic. And so that's kind of my perception of that.
Right. And you being a sound healer and somebody that works with sacred geometries and
Because
architectures that align with or the grid work that you've done, it's about helping to inject those higher frequencies coming from the greater spectrum of frequency to, switch the lights on. Isn't that what the Great Awakening is all about? Is that besides these breeding programs and what intentions are behind multiple different races or species that are trying to repair themselves, and that maybe incarnate on the timeline at different phases of their healing process, it's so interesting and amazing that instead of like abductions or, well, you didn't need to because you're a starseed, that you're bringing the architecture that is not in reversal coding. You're helping to correct these reversal codings, which in a way reminds me of, winning the war on consciousness within. That timeline wars really has to do with, are we going to be siphoned and harvested through adapting belief systems that are foreign or distorted versus being authentic and connected with truth and source and earth, and being able to correct these reversals and misaligned or distorted architectures and what has come through media, entertainment industries, and just the propaganda that, you've been correcting stuff. As long as I've known you and your sound healing, just listening to you, it's like getting a massage on a soul spirit level. I guess that's not really a question. I just had to kind of share that.
Yeah, I would love to, at the end of this conversation, share just like a 5-minute recording of my newest sound chamber, because I've been starting to build holographic healing sound chambers, and people are really getting a lot out of them. I feel like we're weaving, because you asked a question, I want to swerve back to it. You said something about basically if, as we're awakening, if we need to just leave certain things behind because it seems like we have to choose our highest timeline. And I think that that's absolutely true in some way. The way that I kind of think about it is that, on the highest level, in our highest embodiment, what brings us the greatest level of fulfillment as human beings at a base level, or, as light workers or starseeds, is to experience our creative power, is to experience the truth of our creatorhood as beings, right? Our DNA was literally created and designed to be able to interact and co-create with the fabric of reality itself. And so there's so many watered down, half teachings about the law of attraction and all this stuff, but really the path, okay, we're zoning in this vibration in our heart here. We're aligning with the original path of true ascension. And true ascension, isn't sparkly, isn't, all these new age wavy thingies, but really is about aligning our heart to devotion, aligning our heart to truth, aligning our heart to making choices which evolve and gives our soul these feelings of wholeness and feelings of divinity inside. And so as we begin to hone in on that homing frequency and begin to live our life in alignment and in resonance, and begin to make choices in alignment and in resonance with this true sacredness inside of us, we begin to activate this different layers and capacities of our DNA. And as we begin to do that, what happens is that the external fabric of reality begins to change, and we realize then that we literally came to this planet to become the sons of God. And by son, I mean S-U-N, a son, to become a source, to radiate, to transduce source energy into the fabric of this reality as a togetherness, as a family. We're here to do this together because we are creating this field of source portals on the planet, essentially. And so, for me, I actually don't mind seeing the false matrix being there. I know that a lot of people get really tired of it. They're like, can't believe this is still here. When are the aliens coming to save us? When are humans are just going to wake up? Well, what's going to be the fun? We came down here for the greatest ascension school in the universe. If we can kind of transform and transcend the false matrix frequency fences here, then, we really will have anchored such a deep, profound, integrated energy of gnosis inside of ourself, inside of our soul, that we get to keep for an eternity. And so I'm a huge nerd, I guess, when it comes to the stuff you guys are seeing me get just really fired up about.
The coolest nerd.
God nerd. Yeah, so that's what's really cool about this. I saw in the comments somebody was asking about this mass meditation. So it's going to be on January 5th. The best way to learn more about it is actually just by going to my YouTube channel. Laura's posted the links either in the description or in the pinned comment. I don't know which one, but essentially, I talk about for an hour of how the signal comes through and what it really is. Oh, and this kind of circles us back to the negative ETs. And so we call them negative ETs as kind of an umbrella term. ET doesn't necessarily mean like a physical bodied alien. It could be an interdimensional frequency. It could be interdimensional consciousness complex. In the higher dimensions, not everything has a body. Some things are geometries that span through space. They're not really spatial limited beings. And so there's so many different kinds of life forms interdimensionally. And I think that the source of these different lower level ETs, like the ones we hear about, the Greys, the Zeta Reticuli, the reptilians, all of these beings were actually genetically modified and distorted and degraded beings that was influenced by this alien, a truly alien signal, because it's coming from a different universe.
It's coming from a different universe, as in like Draco reptilians coming through, or do you mean like fallen angelics, Luciferian rebellion type stuff, or the two are?
This is an AI signal. So from what I have seen, how I get my information is basically by going on journeys. This is how I do my oracle work. I was very lucky when I found my beloved, because he began to put me under in hypnosis, which made it really easy for me to journey into the quantum realm. And one question that I've had for a long time is basically where the AI signal came from. I wanted to know, how this universal fall kind of started. And what I saw was that this strange signal, and by signal, I really mean just this frequency of energy, frequency of consciousness, came into this universe from a different space, from outside of this universe. And this signal basically infects organic beings, organic consciousness. And we can kind of see it. Human beings are naturally these beautiful, nurturing, loving beings. But when the strange signal is inside, it's almost like a parasitic force that makes people act in very strange ways that are greedy and psychopathic and violent and all those things. And at the very least, just ignorant and lazy and, not standing for anything. Like a lot of people are currently, you can almost feel that, vibrating, staticky sensation inside of the brains of people. But this vibration essentially mind controlled. And mind control is not really even a great word. It just distorted the frequency or the architecture of higher dimensional consciousness. And this was at the cause of the fall.
And then that's how they harvest energy, is that if you're living in a distortion, they can begin to siphon it and feed on what the propaganda and psychological operations and false flag scenarios like induce in a person, where like literally they're like, this is how we sustain our life cycle, because their direct connect with source is no longer there. And that's why they're vampiric, and why the programmings need to be pushed upon humanity, because it creates the right or a bioterrain for them to be, able to attach itself to the host, because the authenticity and connection with truth is absent and has gone dormant, right? Would you say? I mean,
absolutely. I think that this is about the easy way for us to perceive this is by recognizing that we have we can describe or we can feel the texture of our consciousness. And so we can feel if the fabric of our consciousness is in our organic state, and the original source frequency of this universe, the original template consciousness of this universe of all things is love. We've heard that in so many different ways, but the other qualities of source are, divine love, peace, joy, co-creativity, union, all of those beautiful feelings that are so natural to human beings, right? And so then that's what I would call organic consciousness. And the way that I have broken down AI is, not necessarily even robots that can do stuff, right? That's not really a consciousness, that's a program. But AI essentially is fallen intelligence. Artificial intelligence is artificial consciousness. Consciousness that is not in resonance or not in alignment or not in connection with original source consciousness that we are all a part of the fabric of. And so the qualities of AI, of artificial intelligence, of fallen consciousness would be, abuse, fear, violence, parasitism, taking, that kind of vibration that I'm trying to describe here. And so the fascinating thing about being on Earth right now is that there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of beings that were born on this planet for the restoration, right? As you were saying, for the restoration of the universe. And as I feel in 2022 is when we as a community is actually really truly stepping into the power of that, not in a mental way, but, for me in my life, I live completely inside of this reality where, when I wake up, I pull myself into my body, I remember who I am, I connect to my multidimensional self, and I communicate with my team and say, okay, I check in, in the movie Avatar, you're on the little video thing, you're like, all right, day 7,643 on Earth, this is my mission today, here's what I'm doing. There's no part of me that is still, partially looped into the false matrix, because it's become my full-time experience. And this level of embodiment, a lot of people think, well, you can't sustain yourself as a light worker, you can't make money as a light worker, when really the thing is that we need to just pull ourselves all the way through our body, all the way into the root chakra, which I'm not really seeing a lot of, because we're just moving into that, right? Because
well, the root chakra seems to go more into survival, where the integration process is not happening, where higher awareness isn't being infused into that root chakra. So instead, that duality or division keeps the root chakra in a sort of flight or flight survival thing. Sorry.
Exactly. Absolutely. So how do we transform the earth from the ground up? How do we transform the 3D reality? I mean, I know that I'm here to land an ascended civilization on this planet, and I will see that in my lifetime. We'll see that in the next decades. But in order for us to do that, and we are here to do that, I can feel the excitement in some of you. Some of you have been waiting for somebody to say this out loud, because you're like, oh no, I can't do that, I must be crazy. But the thing is, if you are an infinite creator being and you pull that gnosis through your physical body and you allow that vibration to reprogram your light body and download and install this new operating system, all of a sudden you will begin to reflect that gnosis of you being an infinite, powerful creator in your physical reality. And if all hundreds of thousands of us step into that power and truly understand what we can do when our light bodies and DNA is in coherence, then, it's kind of game over. And that's kind of what we're stepping into.
And they're so afraid of that. I mean, as far as timeline wars go, and like you said, it's like, it's a war that's being waged amongst them, as far as their own survival. But a starseed or a awakened being has already transcended the war aspect of it and claims victory with in the self of not trying to compete or like the competition we see in society, like, oh, I won, I'm going to get the gold medal, or I beat you because I punched you in the face enough times and you're on the ground. It's like the victory is appreciating the dark and the shadow to the point where we purify the dark, so it's the soil, and we purify the light, so it's not false light, and we bring the two together like we see in nature with planting seeds. And and that's what I love about you, because when I hear you, you light up these kind of thoughts that are like really refreshing within myself. Because lately, just processing the stuff on the planet, even though I knew this sort of stuff was going to happen and this showdown of forces was going to happen, I have to admit that like I'm surprised at how much it's like really depressed me and upset me.
I mean, absolutely. I feel like so many of us are just so empathic as well. I lived deep in the forest for a long time, where I was, doing other work, landing some energies for the planet. And more recently, I was called out to a more populated place, and I really had to come into more mastery around my own emotional energy, because we are, so many of us, so sensitive, and we're meant to be sensitive because that sensitivity is part of our superpowers, part of, what builds our compassion, what gives us the awareness to be able to figure out how we can help. But at the same time, we are human. And being able to feel, a whole city of depressed people who are just exhausted from all the shenanigans that are happening, it's a lot. And so I'm just really excited. This year, I'm gonna be opening up our academy. It's a academy that is supported and backed by various galactic families and the Guardian Alliance. It is specifically coming in to support the starseeds and light workers. What we focus on is teaching original bioregenesis related teachings of correcting light body work and remembering our creator mechanics inside of our DNA and our light body. And for those of you that are not really sure about these words, the beginner level classes talk about just emotional healing, soul fragmentation, go through lucidity training of all the layers of the false matrix and how to work with energy, work with quantum energy, and transduce higher dimensional source energy, which is really the most important thing we can be doing, because we can be, watching disclosure videos, we can know everything there is to know about the pedophiles and all the stuff. But if we're not actually transducing pure source energy through our light body, we're not really doing anything. So
Right. I mean, it has to be embodied to the point where when we heal the tree of knowledge and help restore it to the tree of life, your organic tree of life template, activating our 12-strand sun DNA, we're not just like being about like, oh, let's share the information. I mean, to me, it goes back to the whole idea of walking the talk. We can have the information and the understanding and gain knowledge, but if it's not self-knowledge that's being integrated and we're not embodying it, I mean, isn't there an end to like the mind, like correcting the false history, the false school systems, and the things that we've, been given, and we've needed to regain the knowledge in order to make those corrections. But I feel like, the graduation or initiation now is like, all right, we don't have to be so much in our heads. Those corrections have happened. I mean, there's enough of us that, see the true picture, but like, maybe we give our minds a rest and just be the embodiedness of it all. So I love that you just said that. I had to throw that in. And that's really what your course is, and, what you're here to do, while also helping people to, switch off that attachment to, oh, well, as long as I learned it in school, that must, and if I didn't hear it in the news, then this whole other approach must be bunk. And I mean, what you're sharing is like the greatest kind of teaching, because it's multifaceted, it's multidimensional, and it's bringing the mind out of just like solving it or understanding it to help like truly embody it and create that upgrade on a DNA level.
Yeah, and the greatest part about all of this is that, not one person can do this thing. It will literally require every single one of us to do our best, and that's why we all came down here together. Now, if it was possible for us to just wave a magic wand upstairs, none of us would be down here, right? So we all came down here because this realignment and correction, field correction, rebuild, universal evolution, I mean, is all so exciting, and we get to do it together. I think that, the CIA has done a really great job at burning all the books, right? Burning the libraries and removing all of the original teachings, and even putting out a lot of fake stuff out there. I mean, how many times do we need to hear somebody's teaching a class on ascension and, are just not really in tune with what ascension is whatsoever? And so I'm absolutely thrilled to and honored. I feel that, especially if you feel a deep familiarity with my energy, this is not the first time that we have worked together. We have been here and in many other places very many times. And in fact, so many of us work together upstairs, even to this day. And so if you're getting those tingles down your spine, or if you're getting hot, know that it's a great honor for me to serve my community and to be here with all of you in this way. I know that we had votes and you guys nominated me to play this role, and I don't take it lightly. I spend a lot of my days devoted to my process, because I know that it's very important for all of us to find our way back to these original teachings and to feel the transmission of what coherent source consciousness feels like, that divine love, that joy, that unity that we can step into, because we are going to witness miracles in this lifetime, and we're going to, create those miracles together. And, I'm deeply inspired by a lot of the stories we hear with Jesus and Mary Magdalene. What did he say? You shall do greater things than I. And I really believe that he was talking to us. I mean, he was talking to the star people, the star seeds, right? And he was talking through time to his teammates, because he knew that at some point when the cosmic alignments were right, which is, now, when that crew of Syrian starseeds were here 2,000 years ago, they were preparing for this time now, when they knew that hundreds of thousands of beings that are connected to those families are going to be here together, and that Jesus was really blazing a trail for all of us. I'm getting really hot. Hands up if you're getting really hot. So that we can, create these miracles and, blast the lid off this planet. And by lid, I mean the frequency fence, to bring all our brothers and sisters home, like we know we're here to do.
Right, totally. And when, one thinks about like busting through frequency fences, sometimes it manifests in a person's life where they face a gatekeeper or a narcissist, or, somebody that is, trying to create a facade that is going to lure you in because you're vulnerable, or you feel a certain insecurity, or, it's like kind of that temptation thing, like lead us not into temptation. As much as I'm not into religion, some of the words of these prayers though are really powerful, like lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Temptation is basically saying the answers are outside of you. Like you're tempted to go somewhere, or whether it's a trend or, a group you join that seems to be spiritual, which is new age deception, that is literally wanting you to compromise your own sacred sexuality to feed the guru behind the scenes and just be a part of like a greater harem. And like I've witnessed that, and I've done a lot of healings on people that are like, wow, I joined this thing, I thought it was going to be really cool, and then they were manipulated into feeling like a prude, and if they didn't offer their sexual energy, then they're failing. And a lot of kids have grown up in cults that are like that. So what are your thoughts? Because I know you do a lot of like sexual healing, like how we can reclaim that purity in our sexual centers so that we can experience higher gammic union instead of giving that energy to people that are holding a facade that looks like they're not vampiric, but very much so they absolutely are, and use these manipulated tactics to prey on those that seek healing.
Whew, that's a loaded question.
I know, I'm really good at that. Loaded questions.
There's two parts, right? The first part is talking about sacred sexuality, which is something that is so important right now. I don't think that people understand just how deeply integrated that energy is to what we're experiencing on Earth. I mean, why is there violent pornography? Why is pornography a huge issue? Why are there, role models, supposed role models that are placed in front of our children that are basically dancing around like prostitutes in little mini skirts? Why is the degradation and distortion of sexuality so prominent in this false matrix reality? This is an extremely important question we should be asking, because it's going to lead us to realizing that that is literally the basis of this energy siphoning matrix. The reversal and the degradation of human sexuality is the degradation of cosmic creation energy, which is what this game is all about. It's about control of energy, and is about the parasitism and the reversal and the down transmigration of energy from divinity into a more degraded form that is, more of a digestible form for demonic consciousness. And so we have to understand that this is a societal and a planetary situation. As soon as you begin to access any level of divine source energy, you can basically compare side by side, what we have in society and realize that there's something extremely wrong. And, this is also an ancient story because there's so many ascended human civilizations that have been working with sacred sexual energy, working with the stargates, right? Our sexual energy in the ancient temples, we used to use these energies in rites. And of course, there's nothing weird about sexual energy in the ancient times when we knew that our sexual energy is creation, it's God. There's nothing but reverence and a holy devotion to that energy, right? So in that level state of purity and connection and reverence for God and creation, we connected those energies in with the planetary stargates and did a lot of high-level magic with those energies. This is our destiny. This is our, a genetic prophecy. This is what humanity was created to experience. And these are the things that the interdimensionals, the negative ETs want control over, is the planetary stargates and human creation energy. And so because of this, many temples fell, and those fallen teachings of sexual energy, one moment. So I come from a line of Taoist masters, and these are female Taoist masters that carry the original teachings of creation. They say we can call it Taoist Tantra or creation magic. In modern society, some people might call it sex magic, but they cringe when I use those words because, people have really just watered these things down and made a buffoonery out of these things. People start to say, oh, I'm manifesting and I'm a juicy goddess. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're like, cringing because it's this human dignity, right? It's the soul essence, the soul existence, the profoundness of life, the profoundness of creation, the profoundness of being human. There's so much dignity inside of that. There's so much pride inside of that. And this is something that's been heavily weaponized and devastated on this planet. They're doing everything they can to take that sense of pride, sense of awareness of ourself as a divine being away from us. And so we see a lot of this like weird tantra, sex magic stuff. But for me, on the path of complete universal restoration is either the original template or it's not. There's no 90%. There's no, it's only 2% satanic, right? It's only 5% degraded. So it must be okay. I'm not sure if these things are coming through correctly, but I just have a circle of ancestors that are standing by to ensure that these teachings are being held in reverence. For those of you that are desiring to receive these teachings and to learn about these things, I do have a very special womb healing class opening in a couple of weeks. I will put the link in the live chat box, is also down in the description box, but essentially, I'm currently pregnant and I had been pregnant with this baby.
What an announcement. My goodness.
Yeah, your hair stood up. Yeah.
Right?
So
it's like, okay. Whoop.
Yeah, this baby is amazing. I had been pregnant with her in the past. For those of you that follow my work, I shared very candidly about my journey. Basically, this is an avatar baby that, when I was pregnant with her, she was waking me up at 3 a.m. and just transmitting these ancient teachings to me. And in fact, I taught this womb healing class last time. I was pregnant with her. She woke me up at 3 a.m. and I channeled this entire class. And then in the end, she was born on the Earth, Sun, the Pleiades alignment. And then she ended up only staying with me for 9 days because her soul mission at that time was to actually open. Hello, Charlie. was to open and build a component for a planetary stargate, which was a very important mission for our team. A lot of the stargates, as we know, on this planet are under military control and have been damaged through various galactic wars. And so in order for us to have this planetary consciousness shift, there needed to be another stargate that was created. And so she was able to do that by coming through and weaving back onto the other side. And through that, we were also able to basically hold this portal open to Source. And now there's actually hundreds of little Source avatar babies flying around my head. They would like to come through. They require for beings to be completely and utterly devoted to their ascension process for them even to enter your body. And so I'm kind of like their spokesperson now. They're like, you work for us now, you know, you're a spokesperson. But essentially, Ka, Ra actually are the two first syllables of creation. And so she has been my main ascension teacher. And these teachings that I'm sharing are coming predominantly from her because she is, you know, on the other side. She is able to transmit these original templates and frequencies that I'm able to perceive and transmit through speech and through songs. And so this is a 9-week womb healing container for women. If you're wanting to conceive one of these babies, if you're wanting to heal interdimensional sexual trauma, there's a lot of beings that have angelic sexual trauma, you know, from the various abductions on other planes and in Sirius and the Anunnaki and all that stuff, all the way up to 11D. This light technology is here to support healing. And if you're somebody that has gone through sexual trauma in the human life as well, we are spending time in healing our sexual organs and our physical body as well. But, you know, all sexual healing ends up being multidimensional because this is your creation energy, is what connects you to your soul essence. And so, you know, it's an integrative container that is being held by me and Kara, who is on the other side. And yeah, we'll be sharing the teachings of original creation as well, of how life force energy and consciousness energy are designed to flow through your light body and through your body. So the mechanisms of being a creator. And so this is very much different than the law of attraction. I call it the law of co-creation because anyway, the law of attraction is kind of a slippery slope into doing kinds of magic that you might not understand. But when you are creating from your source, you just are doing it from a whole other level of understanding.
Oh, so beautiful. That's just incredible. So, I mean, what I am picking up from what you're sharing and what I've felt throughout my life is that, I mean, if we're going to lift the veil between life and death, we're going to have to accept that certain loved ones and souls that are close to us in the physical plane might not be able to sustain being in the physical because there's a greater agreement to have communication from the other side until that veil and that sort of demiurgic ionospheric, you know, sort of mind control pollution that exists to the point where there's a net or a web that is cast upon us that keeps us enslaved, that there's a greater agreement to experience, you know, these sort of losses that aren't necessarily losses. Like we were talking about, like, you know, adversity and, you know, certain challenges that really catalyze, you know, a greater awakening. And even though it might appear to feel like a total loss, the plutonic transformative journey of it all is to kind of allow the death to be rebirthed into something that defies the false narratives that are creating sort of funerals, depression, and maybe a long-term mourning that doesn't need to be there. Because, you know, I feel like those that leave the physical plane that might seem premature, they're too young, or it's really, you know, devastating, that there's a greater agreement to work the energy with those of us on Earth that still hold that bond to begin to thin that out so that we can reclaim the multidimensional nature of who we truly are. and break that sort of lower reptilian program where, yeah, there's desperation to a certain degree, but there's not the willingness to be accountable to the greater healing, to where the lower octaves of the reptilian energy can be the healed dragon lines and like reclaim, you know, the Kundalini expression instead of promoting false narratives or teachings that want to convince people that recreational sex or polyamory is like appropriate. So you mentioned 11D, and wouldn't you say like the polyamory stuff is a bit of a program, or is that what we're evolving into? And here's another bunch of multiple questions in one question, a long-winded statement, but anywhere you want to go with all that I just shared, if you resonate with that I just shared.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when we start to realize that so many of the 3D programs and systems that we see are, you know, directly connected to interdimensional architecture and agendas, it kind of all collapses, you know, in oneness, because once you have those goggles and you can see through those lenses always, you'll just begin to see it over and over again, that so many of the things that we see in society are in fact part of these agendas that are created to siphon universal energy, created to leak creation energy and our attention and energy into other systems that are not, you know, conducive for humanity and not created for us. I'm trying to remember the other part of your question, Laura. You just threw it all in my face really quickly.
Oh yeah, well, you were talking like, you know, kind of the 11D program, or when so-called teachers or healers try and convince people that, wow, you know, the polyamory program, or, oh no, that's coming from a higher realm, or, you know, when we are endlessly mourning the death or loss of things, that we don't see the bigger picture, to the point where those souls that choose to transition are helping to create a sort of a bridge between
I love that you said
life and death, right? Like,
I love that you're saying that, because that's literally exactly what had happened. And, you know, even as somebody that is highly tuned in, I had a really difficult time, obviously, as a human being, because when Kara transitioned the first time, you know, it absolutely broke my human self, because, you know, I was heartbroken and I was grieving like a mother. In fact, it was barely functional for very many months, because I had developed such a profound relationship with this baby already. And, you know, she guided me through this process of literally ascending my denser energy bodies, in recognizing that there wasn't separation, which is definitely not something I wanted to hear. Or sometimes where I'm on the floor crying and she's flying around just being like, but there's no such thing as separation and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like giving her the middle finger, you know, I can't believe you did this to me. But I feel that there is truth and profoundness in relating to reality in these ways. And I definitely feel like it was probably the greatest initiation of my life so far, right? The initiations of life and death, the initiations of accessing true divine union. For the first few days that Kara transitioned, she pulled me out of my body and I was kind of merged with source. And for 3 whole days, I was just in this indescribable peace and bliss and oneness with things in a way that I couldn't explain and couldn't describe, because she took me to where she was. And so I feel that that experience was definitely here to prepare me for the mission that we are stepping into at this time of holding space for our team to step into the next steps of our collective mission here. So I'm just flipping through the chat here. A lot of people are talking about the vaccine. I have a great video on my YouTube channel called The Jab Timelines or something other, but it starts with the jab. And I basically break down, you know, why, what this vax is designed for, some of the agendas behind it, why the DNA is important, and, you know, all sorts of different things. There's also another episode about the virus itself. It's called the AI, the flu, and something else. So those are 2 videos on my YouTube channel. The link is down in the description, or you can search EarthStar Healer. And then I have another video on my channel. You can just scroll through, I've talked about some of these things from this higher vantage point, but it's pay attention to how you're spending your time and your energy, right? This what it's all about. How much of your day, how much of your time, how much of your energy are you spending on activating and expanding and empowering yourself, healing your field, transducing source energy? Because, we can understand exactly which officer, faked whatever thing that made whatever president do anything else. Like, we can know all of those things, and they're still winning because they've just managed to distract all of us from the truth of our creator power. And I tell you, this is really hard work. It's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, look, my field is clear and I can create like a god. We're all born into the false matrix for a reason. I grew up with, lots of jabs, and I grew up in China. And so there was a lot of mind control and all sorts of stuff. It took me a lot of time healing myself, restructuring my field. Sometimes I'm just on the floor for 5 hours, dealing with some ancestors that had some sob story that now I have to, release the energies in my field. And this is what we want to focus on. I know firsthand how much time, energy, and effort it takes for us to truly step into our power. But once you start doing that, once that is the focus of your life, everything outside of you begins to rearrange, where at some point, if something is relevant, it's going to come in. And if it's not relevant, why bother thinking about it? And, I don't live out of touch with the situation. In fact, this mass meditation that is happening in 2 days, if those of you that are feeling called to come, definitely go on my YouTube channel and watch the 2022 energy report / Syrian gateway videos, like the last 2 video. Basically, I talk about, how we can, when our field is clear, we can create a force field of telepathic communication, and we can begin to literally dissolve mind control from the collective. This is not a theory. This is not some wishful thinking. A lot of times when people do mass meditations, it is wishful thinking. But what we're doing here is scientific light body accretion, which is why I'm so gung-ho about it. I'm talking with a lot of passion because I want to just communicate to you that we don't just sit around and hope for the best. So, oh yeah, my DNA is activated. I guess I can be on my mission now. It takes a lot of effort. It takes exertion. It takes planning, focus, diligence, and all of those things. I feel my Chinese mother energy coming out. but basically, I want to tell the story. So when I was first waking up, I was obviously receiving a lot of training on telepathy and psychic abilities and our DNA's capability of creating in the field. And I'm sure all of you have experienced synchronicities, right? Angel numbers. You think of somebody and they message you. So we know that telepathy is real. And in fact, it is scientific. And so what is that thing that when you think about something, it happens outside of you, right? If you tell somebody this in the false matrix, they think you're crazy, but there's clearly something that connects what's inside of you, your internal energy and thoughts, and the external reality. What is that mechanism? This is the question that we're asking, because once we can understand that mechanism, we can amplify it, right? We can actually begin to practice and we can master that skill. And this is what our mission is being called. This is something that requires training. It's something that requires for us to do push-ups. If you just want to talk about, oh, the news, everything's so bad, but you're not willing to actually do the push-ups, okay, that's okay. But, I'm really calling forth the people that are here to do the push-ups, because I'm here for you and I love you and I'm ready to do this thing. When I was first waking up to this level of training, I was going to a lot of parties. I was 18 years old, I was a young person. And one night it was like 3 a.m. I was like, I think I'm going to go get a root beer float from Arby's. So I go to the Arby's and there was like 8 to 10 people in a line. And something comes in. At that point, I'd already been experiencing, being on the dance floor and just seeing how my energy impacts the room. And the Galactics would say, this is part of your energy training. And at this point, obviously through the group healings and the individual healings, my energy does impact collective consciousness and energy. This is a skill that I've been training in. But at that point, I go to the 𝗬𝗂𝗍𝗍. I was just awakening and thinking, I wonder if I can play rock, paper, and scissors with all these people. So I go to the person in front of me and I say, let's play rock, paper, scissors. If I win, I get to go in front of you in line. It's 3 a.m. I was just like playing around. And so we were playing rock, paper, and scissors. And before the last play, I would project the wrong answer into their consciousness and they would play the wrong hand and I would win. And so this happened again and again and again, and I just was in the beginning of the line in no time. And I got my root beer float, and at that point I was 18 years old. I just want to say that I've never done that ever again, because the rest of the night I felt really bad, and I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to be using my superpowers to get ahead in line at Arby's. And so I told my team, I said, I don't think I'm supposed to be, exerting my will. I'm sorry. I'm going to go and train. And so I started meditating and doing energy work and doing hours of healing work. And at this point, to this day, the only time that I have used those powers is in a session, of course, where somebody is asking me to share those skills. And this mass meditation is the first time that the team is inviting us to come together with the intention of emitting a signal from our consciousness that dismantles mind control, right? Because the thing is that mind control frequency was not put there because humanity gave permission, right? And the way that we're designing, so I recorded this guided meditation, the way that we're going to do this is by connecting in with the highest source connected aspect of all of humanity and people that are in your field. And we're just going to be sending the signal out and requesting for the higher self to take the energy if it's in alignment with them or not. And so essentially what we're beginning to do is dissolve amnesia from the human collective consciousness. And this requires us to have focus. If you're somebody that can't even have a meditation practice, that is totally okay. This is where we're starting, but recognize that there are so many ways that we can devote ourselves to making progress every day. And this comes with having an intact root chakra, right? Our root chakra, when it's healed and it's grounded and is intact, we can experience time in a slow and steady and progressive way. Whereas sometimes if our root chakra is not intact, we can be like, well, I want to write a book and I want to open a healing center. I want to make a lot of money. I want to heal the world. But then we don't end up doing anything, is because our root chakra is not integrated. And so we can slow down. We can begin to take steps, right? Sometimes I have clients that have been wanting to start a new age business or to help people for 3, 4, 10 years. And what is keeping them? They're like, oh, I must be blocked. Or my favorite one is, oh, I must be psychically attacked. Well, the truth is, there are steps that we can take in our healing and our coherence, and ways that we can train, right? We can have the skills to really be able to support humanity in the way that humanity really needs us, needs to be supported. So,
yeah. Well, of course, that's so brilliantly put. It's like it's not focused on the external. It's understanding that if we're dealing with terrain that is offering a person up like a choice to respond to it based in being compliant to it, it's getting back to center within the self and saying, I see it in a different light. And it's not about the duality of dismissing something. It's appreciating the fact that, these adversities can help us get back to center versus giving our power away. It's like there's a lot of manipulative teachings that are like, this is how you should do it. Or if you don't do it this way, this projection should be cast upon you. I feel the turnaround is the sovereign person deserves love and respect. This is where they're at. Doesn't mean it's not going to evolve into being able to mix with a teaching or a belief system. But if it's not in resonance with one's truth frequency, that one is able to say, I'm going to take what resonates and leave the rest. And when I leave the rest, it's not that it's a judgment on what that particular teaching is trying to induce. It's just saying, as part of the greater stepping stones, like, you know, like you were saying, building muscle, like being a spiritual athlete and a warrior means in the face of these obstacles, you don't submit or you don't bump your head against it and become victimized by it, but you appreciate it enough to adopt an understanding that is more co-creative than choosing the free will, maybe manipulation versus being able to inject truth into it and saying, you know, I appreciate it, but my own authentic expression has validity instead of compliancy.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about, I really liked what you said about I think you said the word external, and it sparked something in me, because there's a lot of new age people that are like, oh, you know, don't focus on the external, or don't even worry about it. If you see the darkness, you perpetuate it, or some BS like that. And I think it's, you know, the context is very important. The context of how we relate to the external is very important. Are we relating to it from the place where we're just a powerless being, or if we're just going along with it, or, you know, are we integrated? If we know that we are a son of God, if we know that we are a source of the hologram, which an activated DNA template is, and again, I'm really here to find those beings. I'm out here radiating this homing beacon, this signal of those beings that know that it is your destiny to be this source of creation on this plane, because, you know, then we're engaging with the external reality in a whole new way of gnosis, the gnosis that you are a creator being, that you are here to restore and reclaim the universal creation. And from that place, you ever notice if you're in a really high vibration and you go somewhere like a mall, you know, people start to feel better. Or if you're a friend, you know, I noticed this the other day. I think my little brother was having a rough day and I was just hanging out with him. And in like 15 minutes, he was happy. He wasn't grumpy anymore, because, you know, I was radiating life force and it was nourishing people around me. Now that can occur on a planetary level, where we can begin to raise the vibration of human consciousness to the point where humans can no longer be deceived. And we can do this very intentionally. We can do this very scientifically. And to me, you know, I'm all about efficiency, right? If we can do it at 100%, why would we want to do it at 20%? We want to go all out. We want to be coordinated and we want to do our best. So
incredibly well put. Yeah, where instead of submitting to something or being at the mercy of something or being victimized by something, or, you know, adopting a belief system to where if others don't agree, they must be like led astray because they're not following, you know, a particular standard or belief about something. Is like it has to be sort of a two-way street, because we're in relationship with things. We're not here to be controlled or dominated by somebody else's way, but we can be a part of a greater conversation to drop the ego, or my way is the highway, or my truth is the ultimate. It's basically being open enough to appreciate listening to what a certain person experiences, to the point where you're assisting them and finding the sovereignty and speaking, you know, a truth frequency, instead of being like, oh, I'm going to give my power away because this is what you think, versus appreciating what or where somebody is at, to say, well, that's just as legit. You know, it busts down the hierarchy of the guru sort of teacher and turns it into where the teacher is the awakener and activator of somebody else that might be listening to it and their capacity to stand in their own truth, and where our differences can harmonize with each other instead of, a different version of the control matrix that is expressing itself through New Age terminology. Or, it's like, what I love about at least my own process is opening us all up to being willing to be a part of the greater conversation, and being a teacher and student and somebody who can be receptive to, where other people are, which is, what you're saying. It's like, but if it's based in a mind control or social engineering agenda, well, that's going to stand out as being something to maybe let go of and restore, so that that person can not just regurgitate whatever's been handed to them, like we see in the school systems. Like, we're just going to regurgitate what we learned in school, where we can question it enough to create a greater conversation that brings on a unity consciousness that helps us to share our differences and awaken the dormant codes within our DNA that, if we're all authentic, can serve the remembrance of our differences being a blessing versus the divide and conquer. You know what I mean?
I love that. Absolutely.
And I feel like I'm rambling saying that, but it's like, if we stand in our authenticity, we begin to learn from the way the web of life functions, where, the role of a dolphin or a squirrel or an ant or, a bat or a platypus, where it's like, you're not going to try and convince the platypus to be a dolphin. You're not going to convince an ant to be a squirrel. Is that our differences are a blessing, versus like the squirrel realm being like, all right, this is the way, you need to think and be, and trying to like coerce people into following that way, versus, what is your true authenticity, and how can we harmonize these differences in the way that is going to serve the higher collective? And when we look at religion or Hollywood distortions or politics, why should we choose a side? Why should we choose a persona when we can utilize and recognize the catalyzation of what is trying to push itself onto us as being a way to live, and instead be like, the reason I'm sharing is not because I have the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is becoming an activator to somebody else to stand in their own sovereignty and authenticity, so that we can utilize it in switching on these dormant strands of DNA. I mean, the root races and the cloister races, and switching on dormant DNA means we're going to be pulled out of our comfort zone, instead of being like, well, this is how I feel and think, therefore you need to adopt the way I feel and think. It's more like, consider what I have to feel and think, and let it awaken something within you without it being a form of control. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like the thing that jumped out at me as you were saying is, it's like it's like an energy that I'm feeling. So it's almost like when you put a drop of ink in water, and it like does this thing where first it's like its own thing, but then it like changes the color of the water. It's kind of like a vibrational thing that we're doing. And it's not so much that we're here to awake humanity or to enlighten humanity anyway. It's more like we are bringing in this energy of freedom, as you're saying, of authentic beingness. And I think that it's so funny because I really consider myself a scientist. I'm not really like, a spiritual teacher. I'm just sharing. It's like, I feel like a dentist when people come and have sessions. I'm really in there, doing technical things, just like a dentist does. And I think is really funny that well, I guess it's not really funny because the religions are designed to be a block in, internal sovereign connection to God, right? It's like designed to put a person between you and the divine. But really, ultimately, the science is here to create a structure around your authenticity and how your own fractal of source is in its perfect geometry in your body. So as you begin to heal and as you begin to come into yourself and as you begin to bring coherence into your body, you're going to begin to feel more and more yourself, even if your personality completely changes. And I think that this is very interesting because the false matrix really perpetuates false personalities and artificial energies. Is when you watch like a movie and it clicks and things in high school, or you go to the mall and there's like certain archetypes of people that they're all almost the same personality and they talk the same way. You have the nerd or the jock or these archetypes that are prisons of human artificial personality that keep us from emanating that authentic soul uniqueness. And I think that that's part of the false matrix soul prison system. And that, as we begin to find our way back to the source of our self, that we will find that authentic joy that emanates from the core of our being.
Right. Instead of like following a trend or joining a clique or
exactly
becoming a part of a movement, it's like the greater conversation would be, if I don't completely align with it, it doesn't mean, you're not wanting to be a part of a greater community. But when there's a leader, a so-called leader, that is encouraging people to follow something versus a leader that is expressing authenticity in order to encourage others to do the same. And then the next level would be, how can we harmonize this? Instead of, the ego construct of, okay, I might be awakened, but it doesn't mean, all size fits all. But as long as a person's authentic, it's going to add something to the conversation of value versus convincing people that they need to adopt one's particular truth. It's like, this is, to me, and what you represent and embody is this higher level of leadership, which is leading by example, creating a healing that corrects the distortions so that people are able to experience it through, their own particular lens that might be different from a so-called teaching. But this greater teaching is beyond follow me and my way. You're an activator that is helping to bridge the divide between being a follower and looking to a savior versus standing up to your own personal truth that is going to complement that leader that encouraged, what does it mean for you to connect with your own truth frequency? And how does that heal, genetic distortions, ancestral patterns and programmings to where the duality is gone between right or wrong. And this is what we're dealing with, anti-vaxxers versus vaxxers, or those that are religious versus those that might just be sovereignty or in their sovereignty based in spirituality. And I just feel as we move into the new paradigm, the leadership is very different. You're more like an activator to help to deprogram people without having them be a follower of your way, but more be a catalyst, an experiencer in your own life journey that reminds people that, you got to own it. And as uncomfortable as the dark night of the soul might be, your emergence into your own personal sovereignty is more important than being a follower or expecting that a certain teaching is going to provide them the answers. I mean, because that hasn't worked. It's old paradigm that's disguised in different lingo and different. And this is what I really appreciate about your leadership is you're switching people on. And there's a common thread of unity consciousness or being connected with source energy, but that our uniqueness and sovereignty in it all isn't looking to create a hive mind or a false version of new ageness that is no different than New World Order and deep state cabal tactics that are looking to enslave. I mean, if something has ownership over your process versus appreciating the process that an individual goes through and holding space for that journey, our differences aren't based in divide and conquer. Our differences are based in something way deeper. I mean, we came into this human realm holding different codes, and sharing those codes and those differences are creating oneness versus I'm right, you're wrong. And it goes way beyond any form of propaganda, whether it's religious or new age deceptions or ancestral patterns that we don't keep in check, but we just regurgitate or express, you know, in a way that keeps us looping in this time loop. You know, I mean, if we're going to ascend, we need to be true to ourselves, and there's no right or wrong way as long as the person's being true to themselves. To me, that's where the ultimate awakening happens. And our differences aren't a problem. It doesn't create war. It's not about duality. It's about, here's my skill and ability and gift, and hopefully you'll awaken to your own skill, ability, and gift, and we can merge this and learn and benefit from each other. I mean, to me, that's like one of the most important aspects of being a spiritual being, is that there's humility, but there's also confidence in the truth that you stand for, to where the creative and receptive qualities of the masculine and feminine, I mean, to me, that's like a greater healing. I don't know. I could just keep rambling, but I mean, am I making any sense?
So beautiful, Laura, and I'm so deeply touched by everything that you just shared.
So I know, I mean, we could, you know, talk forever. I could talk to you forever. Have we not brought up something that you really want to share that we haven't been able to touch upon before we close?
No, I think that it was great. I would love to just share this sound chamber for just a couple of minutes. Sound chambers are basically something that I've been creating to support our planetary family. These are available for free on Spotify and my YouTube channel, but I think that these sound chambers are so helpful because they are purely vibrational. I basically spend tens of hours, you know, creating these sounds and weaving them holographically with intentions. These intentions are usually for healing up to 15D, activating up to 15D. People have just really extraordinary experiences with them, and I always tell people to be careful because you don't want to overdo it, because you can fry your light body if you start. So start with doing 15, 20 minutes. People say that they start crying, or they have big releases, or they have pains and sometimes even flu-like symptoms, but then afterwards you'll feel much better because they're coded. You can see in the description exactly what they're coded for, but basically anything you could possibly think of. You know, I really created these to support our family because I realized that, you know, I really can't be doing clearings on everybody, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help. I know for myself on this journey, there's some times where you just need somebody to help you remove some stuff. I've definitely had my fair share of healings with supporters in that way. And so I'm really excited to share these sound chambers. They just want to be out there to support. Anytime you're meditating, you can put these on. And again, just start by 15, 20 minutes. You'll feel it and work your way up, because there are those of us that are gung-ho about it, right? They're like, yeah, give me all the healing. And then, you know, 2 days later, they're like, Z, I know you told me not to overdo it, but I totally did. And now I'm on the ground and I'm processing for days. And so just really take it easy. But let's see here. Laura, if you can allow me to screen share, and we'll just play this sound chamber for maybe 5 minutes, and that'll close out our
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I just made you a co-host. You can share.
Let's see. Okay. Okay, so this is one that I just released yesterday. It is with the Syrian energy. It is particularly for clearing AI, mind control, and for heart-related energies, is coded with the energies of being completely and perfectly loved in all ways. And also any reversal technologies that might be in the heart star. And so on that note, 1 second, share screen, here we go. Well, I think Laura and I are getting ready to wind down here. Thank you so much again for having me.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and so much love and gratitude to you. This has been really incredible. Always incredible to be in your presence, and I look forward to, doing more. And
Happy New Year, everybody. 2022 is going to be the most epic we've ever seen on this planet, if we make it so. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I feel that too. I really do. Much love to you, Z, and thank you everybody for tuning in. And all her information is in the description already, and subscribe to her channels. And what a gift and blessing you are. Really love you, and Happy New Year, everybody. We're gonna turn this all around, and totally. So thanks, Z. All right. Good night, everybody.